Hello students, welcome to the ongoing lecture series on industrial relations and labor laws. In this lecture, we will discuss the approaches to industrial relations and this is part 2. I am Professor Shoma Sengupta, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi. In this lecture, we will discuss the two approaches, the industrial relations systems approach, which was an extension of systems approach of Dunlop, and the Oxford approach. The industrial relations systems approach, it is basically the systems approach to understand the industrial relations system, and that approach was designed by Dunlop. So, Professor John T. Dunlop, Harvard University, presented a general theory of industrial relations and provided tools to understand a range of IR facts and practices, and this we have discussed in our last lecture. So, Dunlop's systems approach model was influenced by sociological frame of reference of 4 elements, that is adaptation, integration, goal attainment and pattern maintenance. It is within this framework that Dunlop analyzed the industrial relation systems. So, Dunlop developed this understanding of industrial relation system with 3 sets of independent variables, and these independent variables are the actors, the context and the ideology of the system. Now, the industrial relation system comprised of certain actors, that is the employers, employees, the government, their union of employers and employees, certain context, that is the type of industry in which it will be applicable, ideology, the ideology of different actors, all these binds the IRS together. It also include a body of rules created by the government to govern the actors at the workplace and work community. So, this is the whole model for understanding the industrial relation system. So, there are 3 elements, that is actors, ideologies, rules, and then there are contextual factors like technical factors and market factors, and that leads to locus and distribution of power in the wider society. So, let us discuss each of these elements in detail. So, first of all, the actors. As we said that main actors are the workers and the owners or managers. So, specifically it includes the actors in the system, which are hierarchy of managers or supervisors, hierarchy of workers and their spokesmen if any, then specialized governmental agencies like private agencies created by the first 2 actors concerned with workers, enterprises and their relationships. These first two hierarchies, that is the hierarchy of employers or managers and the hierarchy of workers, are directly related to each other in that the manager have responsibilities at varying levels to issue instructions, that is to manage. The workers at each corresponding level have the duty to follow such instructions which are given by the managers. The hierarchy of workers may be organized into complementary organizations such as work councils, unions, parties. So, in work councils, the representative of both the workers and the managers also come. In unions, it is the combination of workers. So, the specialized government agencies as actors may have function to override the hierarchies of managers and workers on almost all matters. So, the third actor is the government and governmental agencies. Now, the second element of the industrial relation system is the context. So, the context of IR systems are the technological determination, the market and budgetary constraints, the locus and distribution of power in the larger society. So, when we talk about the first element of the context, the technological determination. Now, technological features of the workplace have far reaching consequences for industrial relation system. because it influences the form of management, employee organization, the problems of supervision, labor force required, and the public regulation. Now, these technological determination, how it is different from one type of industry to another type of industry, can be discussed by taking the instances like the mining industry has a different technological context as compared to the manufacturing industry. Like in mining, you have to take care of certain things like housing, community services, welfare activities, safety of workers, much more than manufacturing industry, because the mining is a entirely different type of industry, requires more attention to these factors. The market and the budgetary constraint is another matter of context. These constraints operate directly upon the managerial hierarchy and also on all the actors in a particular system. The product market may vary in degree and character of competition through the full spectrum, from pure competition, monopolistic competition, to oligopoly and monopoly. These constraints are no less operative in socialist than in capitalist countries. The relevant market or budgetary constraints may be local, national, or international, depending on the IRS. Locus and distribution of power. The relative distribution of power among the actors in the larger society tends to a degree to be reflected within the IRS and also outside power. The function of one of the actors in IRS, the specialized governmental agencies, it is a determining factor, because it is likely to be particularly influenced by the distribution of power in the larger society. The ideology is another aspect of industrial relation system. The ideology of each of the actors is important. So, the ideology of IRS is a set of philosophy or systematized body of belief held by the actors. Now, the ideological differences will be there between the ideology of the workers and the ideology of the employers, as well as the ideology of the ruling government. An ideology defines the role and place of each actor and the ideas which each actor holds towards the place and the function of the others in the system. Each of the actors in an IRS may be said to have its own ideology, like the employer, the employees, as well as the government. The IRS requires that these ideologies be sufficiently compatible and consistent so as to permit a common set of ideas and an acceptable role for each other. So, if the ideological difference is drastic, then there will be always conflict between the parties. So, industrial relation system requires a kind of a commonality of ideologies so that an order can be maintained in the industry. Then another factor of industrial relation system or the model is the rules. So, the rules are established by actors in a given context for the workplace and work community. So, most of the time the rules in the organization is framed by the employers, but rules can be decided upon between the workers group and the employers. So, this network or web of rules consisting of procedures for establishing rules, the substantive rules, and the procedures for their implementation. So, this is different types of rules may be there. The establishment of rules and their application are central to IRS as outputs. The rules change in response to change in the context and relative status of the actors. So, if we go down the history, we find that the workers were not organized. So, the rules were all set by the employers. But now the things have changed and the workers have got a voice through their trade unions, and so they are also participating in rule framing procedure. Now, let us critically analyze the Dunlop's model. So, the strength of Dunlop's model is that It gives a framework based on which any IRS in any scenario can be analyzed. But critics say that it appears to be not realistic about the potential conflict in the IRS, rather than it is a static concept, because all the actors, they continuously change and the power struggle also changes with that. Coming to the next approach, that is the Oxford approach to industrial relations. Now, Oxford approach group or the Oxford approach to IR, it comprises of many theories which were given at different times, and they are combined together to be called as the Oxford approach. Here the theories involved are Durkheim's theory of anomie, Chamberlain and Cohen's theory of collective bargaining, Webb's theory of industrial democracy, Alan Fox's theory of unitary approach, also he talked about pluralistic approach, and Alan Flanders' pluralistic approach. And then there are many schools of thought, many approaches which also are part of the Oxford approach. We will discuss very briefly some of these theories, that is theory of anomie, collective bargaining theory and industrial democracy theory, and in detail the two important theories, that is the unitary approach and the pluralist approach. Starting with the Durkheim's theory of anomie, it describes a state of normlessness or deregulation in the society, or rulelessness, where traditional rules, values and norms lose their authority to regulate behavior. So, he was calling it as anomie. The rulelessness and normlessness was called the anomie. Now, occurring during the rapid social change of crisis, it creates confusion, frustration and a lack of social cohesion, leading to a higher rates of suicide, crime, social disorder. So, this theory emphasizes institutionalized job regulation to deal with the breakdown in the social order. Then came Chamberlain initiative of collective bargaining. So, he initiated collective bargaining as a rule making process aiming at regulation of employer-employee relations. Webb's was another theory. He stressed on economic function of trade unionism and industrial democracy. Flanders combined these ideas and he propounded a theory which was more pluralistic and have only economic he propounded that trade unions have only economic interests. Not only economic interests, but also social and political purposes which being engaged in an institutionalized job regulation. Then there were other writers like Clegg who observed that job regulation must be embodied and observed in institutions and operating through processes. He stressed on the containment of conflict through institutionalization and regulation of the structure of union management relations. Involved in this are various institutions like government, employer organization and employee organization, and he also emphasized collective bargaining and informal negotiation process. Now coming to a main theory which comes under the Oxford approach, and that is the unitary approach to industrial relations. Now this unitary approach to industrial relations was primarily developed and promoted by British scholars in the 1960s and most notably associated with Alan Fox also, and Alan Fox was also a propounder of pluralistic approach, but nevertheless he was part of unitary approach as well. The unitary approach views the organization as a unified team with shared goals, emphasizing loyalty and harmony while largely viewing conflict as unnatural and arising from poor management. So, if we discuss these points, what emerges is, this is considering an organization as a unified force, and they are neglecting the existence of conflict They are calling it unnatural, and even if it is there in any of the organization, they are of the view that it is a resultant of a poor management rather than an inherent character of any organization. So, they are believing that management, if it is working properly, so there will be peace, harmony, and goal directed behavior will be there on the part of all the parties. This approach views the organization as a cohesive family with shared goals. Conflict is seen as a temporary and caused by poor management of or troublemakers. Unions are viewed as unnecessary intruders because there is peace and harmony, there is no necessity of trade unions, and the focus is on direct communication and loyalty to the firm. So, if we discuss the key characteristics of unitary approach, the key characteristics are shared goals, minimal conflict, loyalty and authority, anti-union view, and individualism. So, we have already discussed them in the previous para. Now, we will discuss them in detail. Like when we talk about shared goals, management and staff share the same objectives and work together towards common mutual goals. Minimal conflict. Workplace conflict is not inherent but seen as a temporary aberration arising from misinformation or poor management. Loyalty and authority. The organization demands loyalty from employees and the authority of management is accepted. Anti-union view. Trade unions are often viewed as unnecessary external factors that interfere with the direct harmonious relationship between manager and employees. So, the unitary approach was not in favor of trade unions. Individualism. Focus on individual employee treatment and direct communication rather than collective bargaining. So, these were the elements or characteristics of unitary approach. There are certain advantages and limitations. The advantages are like this approach can foster high employee commitment, improve team productivity, clear accountability. All these will create a positive, stable work culture when it aligns with employee expectations. The limitations are like it can be paternalistic and may ignore legitimate employee concerns. By treating all interests as the same, it can mask underlying issues and suppress necessary disagreements. This approach can lead to poor communication if employees feel they cannot voice their concerns. So, this was the unitary approach. So, the second approach was the pluralist approach of industrial relations. Now, Alan Flanders in 1970 enunciated a pluralist approach to IR, namely job regulation, drawing from theories of the previous theories of anomie, collective bargaining and industrial democracy. Now, this approach emerged as a critique of the unitary perspective also, which sees the organization as a unified team. The pluralist view is associated with the Oxford model of Flanders, and this view focuses on the institutional framework of industrial relations. It assumes that stability is maintained through balancing the power between organized groups. So, it is quite different from the unitary perspective where they are saying that the workers and employers, they work as a unified team. Here we are saying that you have to balance the power between these two groups so as to bring stability in the organization. So, this approach sees the organization as a coalition of disparate interests where conflict is inevitable due to competing goals. So, they do not believe in unitary approach where there is no conflict at all. Here they are believing that conflicts are bound to arise also because the two groups have different perspective, that is the employers and employees. Management's role is to mediate through interests, and trade unions are viewed as legitimate representatives of worker interests. So, they believed in trade unionism. Collective bargaining is considered as the key tool for resolving conflicts. Now, the key aspects of pluralist approach are diverse interests, legitimacy of unions, conflict management, collective bargaining and the state role. So, let us discuss them in detail. So, diverse interests, that pluralist approach believed that organizations they should be seen as multi-structured, containing various groups with their own leadership, authority and loyalty, resulting in diverse interests. Then legitimacy of unions. So, trade unions are viewed as legitimate representatives of employee interests, not as disruptive forces. Thirdly, conflict management. Conflict is viewed as normal but manageable. Management's role is to mediate among interest groups to achieve a dynamic equilibrium. Another aspect is collective bargaining. The primary mechanism for resolving disputes and reaching agreements between workers and managers is the collective bargaining process. State role, they emphasize state role. So, the government is seen as an impartial umpire, creating rules and legal framework to protect the public interests and manage power imbalances. So, these were the key aspects of pluralist approach. Now, let us discuss the advantages of pluralist approach. So, there are many advantages of this approach. They are legitimate representation, effective conflict management, balanced power dynamics, democratic decision making, stability and flexibility, innovation and growth. So, when we talk about legitimate representation, naturally trade unions comes into picture. The approach recognizes trade unions as valid representatives of employees, enabling worker input into the management decisions rather than seeing unions as unnecessary troublemakers, as was the case with the unitary approach. Secondly, it also helps in effective conflict management, like treats conflict as inevitable but manageable, utilizing the mechanisms like collective bargaining, conciliation, arbitration to resolve disputes and enhance industrial peace. Then also the advantage was of balanced power dynamics. So, this approach addresses the inequality in the employment relationship by allowing for a more balanced distribution of power between employers and employees. Democratic decision making is another advantage. The pluralist approach encourages negotiation, compromise and employee participation in decision making, which can lead to better and more accepted policies. Stability and flexibility are the advantages of pluralist approach because it allows for differing interests. The pluralist approach is often better suited for complex organizations, fostering cooperation and stability between labor and management. Innovation and growth opportunities are also higher, like it views conflict as a potential catalyst for innovation and organizational improvement rather than just a disruption. But there are certain limitations of pluralist approach. So, these are the limitations of pluralist approach: assumes balanced power, ignores power imbalances, focus on formalism, neglects non-unionized workers, assumes manageable conflict, fragmented representation and overlooks social inequality. So, let us discuss them in detail now one by one. So, assumes balanced power, like it inaccurately assumes that power is distributed relatively evenly between employers and employees, but this is not the case. Ignores power imbalances. It often overlooks the inherent superior power that management or employers hold over employees and failing to recognize a structural inequality. Now, even if the employees are unionized, but the power is more in the hands of employers in a situation where jobs are few and there are many job seekers. Then focus on formalism. It places heavy emphasis on formal structures like collective bargaining and trade unions and ignores the informal dynamics. Neglects non-unionized workers. The framework often fails to address the interests of unorganized workers who lack formal representations. Assumes manageable conflict. So, it presumes that all conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and compromise, which is not always true. Fragmented representation, it can weaken union power by promoting a fragmented approach rather than unified work representation. Also, the pluralist approach overlooks social inequality. It may ignore broader socio-economic factors that affect power dynamics within the workplace. So, these are the advantages and limitations of pluralist approach. So, as I said that unitary approach as well as the pluralist approach are two important approaches under the overall Oxford approach. Now, let us summarize what we have studied in this lecture. So, we continued with the Dunlop's systems approach. So, Dunlop analyzes the industrial relation system as a subsystem of the social system and also used it to identify the corresponding specialized structures and processes. An industrial relation system comprised of certain actors, context and ideology which binds the IRS together and included a body of rules. The Oxford approach group comprised of a number of notable theories like Durkheim's theory of anomie, Chamberlain and Cohen's collective bargaining theory, Webb's industrial democracy theory, Alan Flock's and Flanders' unitary approach and pluralist approach respectively. When we talk about the unitary approach, it views the organization as a cohesive family with shared goals, conflict as temporary and caused by poor management or troublemakers. Unions are viewed as unnecessary intruders and the focus is on direct communication and loyalty to the firm. The pluralist approach, on the other hand, sees the organization as a coalition of disparate interests where conflict is inevitable due to competing goals, and the management's role is to mediate these interests, and trade unions are viewed as legitimate representatives of workers' interests. Collective bargaining is considered the key tool for resolving conflict under the pluralist approach. The references for this lecture are P.R.N. Sinha, Industrial Relations, Trade Unions and Labour Legislation. This is P.R.N. Sinha and others. Then P.K. Padhi's book Industrial Relations, and also a website eGyan Kosh. There are different other websites also. You can go through them for further readings. I believe you have understood the topic well. Have a nice day and also have a nice read. Thank you, students.